to show relevance in the beginning of this, we need to define fascism. And it states here with the many definitions that fascism is a mass political movement that emphasizes extreme nationalism, militarism, and the supremacy of both the nation and the single powerful leader over the individual citizen, something like the Nazi Party, or is the Nazi Party, because we still have parts of America as well as the entire world that have neo-Nazi regimes. So when we speak about these things, it kind of referred to me an interview with Dr. Cornel West, who is a leftist, and Candice Owens, who is a conservative. And throughout this video, they will try to define who and what they are. But I think it's very important for us to understand in times in our life and at the stages of our lives, who we should really sit down and talk to.
Reducible in such a way
Let me share
that you
this with
end
you
up
guys.
overlooking the complexity of relationships,
fair
but
use.
you want respect, accountability, and answerability. Antifa, there's nothing wrong with being anti-fascist. Fascism is an evil, right? We know it's an evil. We all ought to be anti-fascist in a fundamental way.
I think we all are.
Well, no, you got fascists in the world now.
Who? Oh, in the world, in
Well,
America. Give me
oh.
an American fascist.
Oh,
Okay, so I don't know if this particular guy's name is Nicholas Flyer or this is just a channel that I'm reviewing this particular video on. I see that it says freespeech.com or TV rather, but it's important to note that the so-called interviewer or mediator that brought these two together to have this conversation to be pointed out, because I think at every turn, because he himself is a conservative as well, to be important, his take in this interview as well.
my God, you got neo-Nazi parties of fascists.
But what percentage of the American
Oh, no, it's a
populace
small,
is
very,
that?
very small, but I mean, there's such a thing as fascists in America.
Sure.
And then you got...
See, anytime someone challenges you after you giving an answer, which is true, then to define the percent or the number in which it is within your particular region is to counteract the relevance and the impact of the statement that you first made. We must pay tribute that there are a lot of fascist groups within America by the way of neo-Nazis. And they're going to point out the KKK later in the video here, but these things I really want you to take note to understand how the interviewer is more controversial to Cornel West than even Candice Owens is.
a spectrum, because I mean, there's a spiritual fascism inside of all of us in terms of what Augustine called the libido dominante, which is the lust for domination. And as a Christian, I could see it inside of myself. I can see it inside of every human being. Sin, a gangster proclivity resides inside of us. That is a kind of spiritual fascism. But political, economic fascism, institutional forms, we don't have a fascist party, but we got people who have deep fascist sensibilities. I'm going at Brother Trump on this in terms of when you actually attempt to engage in forms that are swerving outside of the law or suspending the law or demonizing vulnerable people, those are quasi-fascist sensibilities. But fascism as a whole ideology, we don't have a wholesale fascist ideological movement, but we've got some elements of it. The Klan is, I mean, the Klan had deep fascist sensibility. Would you agree with the Klan was deeply fascist?
Absolutely, and we have to remind ourselves that the Klan, they were Democrats, and I was actually going to make the argument that I see the Democrats actually they have a lot of fascist tendencies. And just in talking about the fact that I cannot go to a college campus and speak about the fact that I'm a black conservative and talk about why I believe in conservatism for black Americans, why I love Dr. Thomas Sowell, why I believe that the economics, are wonderful.
So I think it's I think it's important that we understand Candice Owens in these regards and who she essentially, is sitting down with. because while it is important to engage in open and honest discussions about race and politics, I believe that the decision for Cornel West to sit down and talk to Candice Owens might be seen as very problematic now that he's running for president. Is it not? Because Owens, she has been known to make controversial statements and hold conservative views that some argue undermine the fight against racism, and in a lot of regards perpetuate harmful narratives. Because by giving her yet again another platform and engaging in dialogue with her, Cornel West might inadvertently lend credibility to her ideas, because throughout this video, he has agreed with her on many occasions, even though he's a leftist and not necessarily a liberal, right? So by lending her credibility, which could potentially harm efforts to address systematic racism and social injustice, this may be called back up and hurt his presidential run. Because furthermore, we understand that Candice Owens is affiliated with the Conservative Party, which is now looked at the old school Democratic Party of majority racists, right? And those who are collaborators with the system of white supremacy. Not stating that all of them are white supremacists, but in collaboration with them. And we understand, she has been criticized presently, historically, but we have to put into respect the ongoing stances on racial issues that she undermines every time she gets a platform to speak. And I believe engaging in the conversation with Candice Owens could be seen as legitimizing or normalizing the rhetoric from the Conservative Party's approach to race, despite the track record of policies and actions that have disproportionately affected Black America. So by participating in an interview or discussion with Candice Owens, in some regards, because my dear brother Cornel West, as he always states, might unintentionally contribute to the false equivalency between the Democratic Party and the Conservative Party when it comes to addressing racism and economics. While no political party is without flaws, and I'm no Democrat or no Republican or no independent, I'm just Black, right? Because when we look at it, the Democratic Party on the surface, okay, has generally been associated with advocating for social justice and progressive policies aimed at reducing racial inequality for Black people. But we know that the heart of the matter is just the opposite. It perpetuates stereotypes. It perpetuates the criminal class. It perpetuates the school to prison pipeline for Black Americans, especially Black American men. So by engaging with Candice Owens, who aligns herself with a party that has often been criticized for its lack of commitment to racial justice, okay, shout out Supreme Court Justice, Cornel West might inadvertently create the impression that the two parties are equally culpable for perpetuating racism, which could hinder meaningful progress in addressing systematic issues. But I will say, throughout this video, I've learned a lot about Cornel West, and believe it or not, he reminds me of some other political figures because he has a lot of conservative views, which at the heart, America, believe it or not, a lot of Black people are conservatives, not stating that you are a Republican, but you may have a lot of conservative values that stem from traditional old Black American families. Now, in this whole discussion, dialogue, and trying to understand the essential parts of race and political empowerment or freedom of political over governance and Black empowerment in a sense, I just believe that the decision for Cornel West to engage in a conversation with Candice Owens on race, economics, that racism in America might just be seen as a misstep. You guys can argue for yourselves.
A wonderful man.
I think he's wrong on a lot of things, but he's a brilliant man. Go right ahead.
I think he's right, but and you can think that, and we can both sit here and we can have this conversation and have an argument, and we do that.
Absolutely.
Because we're talking about Thomas Sowell.
Speak about the fact that I'm a Black conservative and talk about why I believe in conservatism for Black Americans, why I love Dr. Thomas Sowell, why I believe that the economic.
That explains a lot from Candice Owens, because when we talk about Thomas Sowell, who's also part of the Conservative Party, who has been highly criticized for, him supporting policies and positions that may argue are detrimental to the interests of Black Americans. Now, Candice Owens, right? We know her to be a prominent promoting candidate of a conservative person, so to speak, not to ill will or denigrate her in any sort of way. But herself, as well as Thomas Sowell, have often downplayed the existence of systematic racism and dismissed the experience of Black Americans, which we have to understand her history. She's not a Black American. She too is either, I believe, first or second generation immigrant. So I understand her perspective because she doesn't share the same history, because her statements often deflect from acknowledging the ongoing racial disparities and injustices faced by the Black community, right? Because she disregards the lived experiences and evidence of racial inequality, because Candice Owens undermines the urgency and importance of addressing systematic white supremacy, systematic racism, and obstructs meaningful progress, while her so-called beloved Thomas Sowell, right, who is, in air quotes, a conservative economist, and some people regard to him as an intellectual, they have expressed views that are frequently used to support policies that are detrimental to Black Americans, right? Because while Sowell has been praised by some for his scholarship achievements, his opposition to affirmative action, that a lot of that is going to be overturned here pretty soon, the welfare programs and other measures aimed at addressing historical and ongoing racial disparities has drawn criticism. And I hate to say this, because truth is the truth. In some regards, I do agree with the opposing on some parts of the welfare program, not the entire welfare program, because first and foremost, these numbers are very skewed. Majority of the people who are on welfare are white Americans. But just like anything else, you take the third largest demographic in America and you put them at the heart of the poverty class, and you put them at the heart of the criminal class, which is very, very disingenuous, misleading, and untrue. Now, with the policies which Sowell and many of his conservative compadres oppose, are crucial for combating the systematic barriers that have disproportionately affected Black people like ourselves, right? Because just think about it. The Conservative Party as a whole has often been accused of pursuing policies that exacerbate inequality and disproportionately harm Black communities. Because when we look at history, the Conservative Party's positions on issues such as voting rights, criminal justice reform, economic policies, and even social programs have been seen as detrimental to the well-being of advancement of our people, of Black Americans. So critics argue, right, and critics, majority white, that Conservative Party's emphasis on limited government intervention and market-based solutions fail to address the systematic barriers that perpetuate racial inequality. And at the heart of this, even though on the surface the Republican Party is what it is down to its core, we have to understand on the surface, the Democratic Party is in opposition of the views of the Conservative Party, while their core is the same as the Conservative Party.
Yeah, a wonderful, wonderful man.
I think he's wrong on a lot of things, but he's a brilliant man. Go right ahead.
I think he's right, but and you can think that, and we can both sit here and we can have this conversation and have an argument.
Let's skip ahead here a little bit. I want you guys to hear this as well.
White supremacist militia and KKK, and you agree that KKK is fascist, right?
Well, I agree with him that I just don't know where it is in this country. So I've been able to travel to 47 countries over the past, 47 states over the past year, and I've not encountered or seen any pockets where I've seen Ku Klux Klan members. Do I believe that racism still exists? Of course, racism still exists. By the way, it's always going to exist. There's always going to be Black people that hate white people. There's going to be white people that hate Black people. But the question
Right.
of whether this is some organized cell in our country that has a lot of power, I strongly disagree with that.
Well, I wouldn't say it has a lot of power. I would say it has some presence. I mean, they have empirical investigations, though, my dear sister, where you've got over 600 and some white supremacist militia groups, some of whom have death threats. And the FBI keeps track of them because the FBI infiltrates them.
Where are they?
You see? I don't know where they are because I
That's
don't
the
hunt
problem.
them
See,
down.
They give
that
you
should
death
tell
threats?
you that they're not a presence because we're two black Americans and we're two black
Absolutely.
Americans. We should
I mean, the
instantly
FBI
know
is
where
not
they
going to be
are.
lying. I'm not a fan of that.
So Candice Owens just tripped up Cornel West, in my opinion, even though I don't think anybody knows that knowledge off the top of their head. We know that they exist, but she says, then where are these neo-Nazi groups that you keep referring to? And I'm going to back it up because I have some information here for Candice Owens.
Some white supremacist militia groups, some of whom have death threats. And the FBI keeps track of them because the FBI infiltrates them.
Where are they?
You see? I don't know where they are because I
That's
don't
the
hunt
problem.
them
See,
down.
that's-
Okay, well, she's trying to state where are these militia groups at, where they reside. So let's help her out. So the American Futurist groups, now these are neo-Nazi hate groups and their location, Candace Owens. So if you want to go find them and seek them out and maybe give them an interview, well, here you go. American Futurists, Denver, Colorado, Michigan, and Ohio. The American National Socialist Party, good old Texas. American Nazi Party, New Hampshire. Aryan Freedom Network, Texas. Aryan National Army, New York. Aryan Nations, Church of Jesus Christ Christian, California and Ohio. Aryan Nations, Church of Jesus Christ as well, Arizona, Kentucky, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Austin, Texas, Creativity Allowance, Illinois, Daily Stormer, Ohio. And the list goes on and on and on. I'll just name states. You can look at the names family. Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Michigan, Minnesota, Nebraska, North Dakota, Texas, Washington, Wisconsin, Iowa, Mountain City, Tennessee, Indiana, okay, Arizona, Florida, Indiana, Mississippi, Montana. And these are different names like the National Socialist Movement. Look how many states they are residing in. National Socialist Order, Colorado, National Socialist Resistance Front, National Socialist Resistance Front again. What else we have? New Order, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the NSDAP, Florida. I mean, the list continues to go on and on and on. So if Candice Owens wants to know where these neo-Nazi groups reside, then she can take this as reference and then go seek out and locate them so she can talk to them and have a discussion with them. Try that out for change.
That
You
should
death
tell
threats?
you that they're not a presence because we're two black Americans and we're two black Americans. We should
I mean, the
instantly
FBI
know
is
where
not
they
going to
are.
be lying. I'm not a fan of the FBI.
Well, I'm not saying I'm not a fan of the either, but I'm saying is that
Yeah.
if this was something that was so obvious, two black Americans sitting here, I'd be like, I'll tell you exactly where they are because I walk down the street over here. They're in Virginia, in this city, in this town. They meet here on Sundays. Every black American that I ask that says there's a Nazi or a KKK president.
Now, this is the stupidity of Candace Owens and just a little bit of ignorance on Cornel West, because she's stating that we should know where these groups are and, oh, I know they're right here on this corner in this sector. White supremacists just don't walk around in uniform unless they having some sort of gathering or march or protest of sorts. White supremacists wear regular clothes and commit hate crimes, racism, bias, discrimination at any time, at any day, at any moment. So again, she is being very manipulative and disingenuous in her combative opposing argument to Cornel West, stating that they are neo-Nazi groups in America, which are fascist, that want to eradicate America of any non-white person, majority black, because we understand that there's neo-Nazis that are in the Hispanic community. There are neo-Nazis that are in the Asian communities. And unfortunately, there are neo-Nazi white supremacist collaborators in the black American group as well.
You just go where? They go, I don't know, I read it somewhere. And I think that that's unacceptable.
Well, they often cite this SPLC hate map that looks
The
like
SPLC.
That's unacceptable that black people do not know where all the neo-Nazi, skinhead, KKK, white supremacy groups are. Are you serious? The majority of the country is 70% white, non-Hispanic. And you're telling me that even though these people don't go around wearing uniforms like the KKK, and here's the thing, does the KKK wear their uniforms or their cone heads or their sheets everywhere they go? Absolutely not. That's just stating like black empowerment groups like the Black Panthers, that they always wear a black Kango with a leather jacket? Absolutely not. They wore a majority of the time because they was an empowerment group and not a hate group, because they understand that because of Fortune 500 businesses make majority of their money from non-white people, right? Then they're not going to allow people in their population, in their business, to promote hate, but they ignore certain things that propel hate within society of America.
Post
hate group.
offices.
I'm on the SPLC list.
No, SPL, tell me what the SPLC is now.
The Southern Poverty Law Center
Oh,
has
Southern
these
Poverty
hate
Law
maps.
They're
Center.
a hate group.
And
Yeah,
you look at it, and
I'm on
it
it.
honestly looks like
I don't
it
see
looks
hate.
like post offices. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
No,
And
but
you go,
they've
that's
tried
not-
to, but same is
that's
true. The
just not true.
Anti-Defamation League
I
will
agree.
tell you that there are hate groups against black folk, against Jews, against Muslims, against a variety of different folk, and they've got some data.
But
I mean,
they're-
we
no,
can't
they
They're
don't.
deny
also
that.
not considered a credible source.
They're not,
The
because they're
Anti-Defamation
funded.
League is not a-
no,
not a
they're
credible
not.
source.
They're
They're
funded
a joke.
leftists. They're funded
Oh,
leftist.
no,
group,
Anti-Defamation
progressive.
is not leftist. Now, they coming at me tooth and
I
nail.
sat in Congress with them, and I'm telling you right now,
They're not leftist.
if you saw my recent thing in Congress, I was sitting with all of these professors and all of these people that were, and they had no numbers, and they said,
Let's
well, we
move
don't
on,
know the
family.
numbers, but we do know that it's happening. So to me, that seems like a means to monster. I mean, you saw it after our debate. Like, we had a debate, and it's like, headlines, big explosion. That's not how I felt ending that debate. That's not how you felt. I emailed, tried to get him on the show, but that's what they need. They need to make it seem like we're constantly at war.
Well, you're a huge
Well,
threat to the
people
left.
sensationalize. They sensationalize these kind of things all the time for their own ends, for
Right.
their own gain. No, but I didn't mean to interrupt. Go right ahead.
No. And I think Candice is a threat to the left because she's bringing blacks to Trump. And without the black vote, the DNC is done forever. Can you maybe explain what Blexit is?
Yeah, so I mean, I started the black exit from the Democrat Party we've seen pretty much the same thing. The Democrats, it's undoubtedly have taken advantage of the black vote over the last 6 decades. I mean, that is not, you cannot question that. And any black person in good conscience that sits down and says that the Democrat Party has not taken advantage of the black vote, in my opinion, is a bad moral character.
I do agree. I do agree with her with that.
And you have to watch those bad faith actors. To me, Blexit is about reminding the black community that we are staunchly conservative. We are conservative. You cannot untether the black community from our faith. You know, I grew up in a very Christian household. You cannot untether the black community, although the government has systemically attempted it, from the family. I grew up and my grandfather was all about the family. These are largely conservative principles now, as you have the left is advocating really for the disruption of family. Trans, men can be women and women should be men, and kids should pick their gender. And if you Google, this is a real thing, if you Google straight couples, all that returns back to you are gay couples. And they say there's something wrong with you if you believe in the nuclear family. And they're trying to grow government. And we've already experimented with that in the black community. We've seen that more government has earned us more heartache over the last 60 years. You can look at any statistic. Illiteracy rate.
Now, in these very small, refined talking points that Candice Owens have right here, once again, I do agree.
Oh, hell no!
Rates in Black America, they're not serving us in terms of the Department of the Education. You know that. I know that. The breakdown of families, single motherhood rate at an all-time high at 74%. You know that. I know that. So how can we stand behind people that are advocating for more government? Handouts. $22 trillion into the welfare system. Black Americans are poorer today than when they started giving out welfare in the beginning. So my perspective is just, we gotta try something different, and that something different is getting up off of our own 2 feet, putting our families back together, starting our own businesses, and that is a free market capitalist perspective, which lands me on the side of conservatism.
But you see, exactly. But
It kind of speaks to reparations, where when she keeps stating government handouts, and believe it or not, she's an anti-reparationist, and this is what she's referring to, because she's talking about independence or unlimited free government or independence from government, and we have to understand that refers to a conditional state where individuals or entities are free from government excessive control, interference, or reliance on the government for various aspects of life, right? It implies a level of autonomy and self-sufficiency that allows individuals as well as organizations to make decisions and act independently without undue influence or restrictions from the government, right? Because when we think about it, you have to look at what the individual liberty, right? Independence from government emphasis, the freedom and autonomy of individuals who exercise their rights to make choices without excessive government intervention. This includes personal freedoms, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, and freedom in your privacy, which are protected by constitutional guarantees. Economic freedom, right? Independence from government can also pertain to economic matters wherein individuals and businesses have freedom to engage in voluntary transactions, own property, and pursue economic opportunities without excessive government control. But when it comes to economic freedom, this can highly negatively work against Black Americans, especially when we think about the Homestead Act, right? Because they gave majority of white immigrants large plots of land to be properties in America while promising certain things to Black Americans at the time, but then recanting and taking recourse on the land that was given to some Black Americans during this time. And so if you don't create laws and policies for Black Americans to gain a small foothold, which very, very limited today, but even with that being said, that our forefathers and ancestors fought for, then we will be worse than we are now. We are already at zero. We are already at -1. Picture that the laws on the books that our forefathers fought for, we'd probably be at a -100. We're still on an uphill battle. We're still going up an uphill climb, but nonetheless, family, limited government intervention. Again, I'm kind of 50-50 with this because it's, in some regards, it's hard for me to explain it fully because independence from government implies a reduced role of the government in various aspects of public and private life. We also understand that government, state and federal, imposes and create and enforces the law and policies that could benefit us. I didn't say that it is, that it could benefit us, because while some level of government regulation intervention is necessary to maintain order and protect public interest and emphasize on independence, means limited government interference, such as essential areas as national security, public safety, and ensuring a level playing field of fair competition for Black people as well.
I think the challenge here is because both of us share a deep Christian faith. Both of us share a profound commitment to not just our family, but our loved ones. And both of us recognize that when the issues of integrity, honesty, decency, generosity, that just cuts across race, gender, sexual orientation, national identity. Those are just spiritual and moral values. But I agree with you, when you do work, you still live in poverty. This is where wealth inequality comes in. And see, when you talk about free market capitalism, if we had a free market capitalism, that's one thing. We've got a corporate dominated.
We have crony capitalism.
Exactly. It's crony, it's predatory, 1% at the top, no matter what color they are at the top, even though they're disproportionately vanilla, but we shouldn't have bailed out the banks. We would agree with that. No,
totally
absolutely.
We need real capitalism, free market capitalism, not crony capitalism.
Well, I would just say we need a fair society.
So this is the part I was referring to. There's a lot of part of this interview, you can go check it out for yourself, that Cornel West actually agreed with Candice Owens, and Candice Owens actually agreed with Cornel West. And there's a lot of part of this to understand they're two separate, but in some regards, same agenda. Even Cornel West calls out the racism in the Democratic Party and being on the plantation, which he states he's not on the Democratic plantation, as well as him coming out this year running for president. So I do think that you guys probably need to watch this entirety, but I'm just kind of giving you commentary on this because I thought it was a really important conversation. You know, you have a figure like Candice Owens. Of course, everybody's going to tune her out, especially if you're, a black Democrat, so to speak, but I'm stating that the conversation itself has a lot of contextualizing factors in which black Americans could understand and should comprehend in order to understand how both of these people are working. I don't want to say together. I know that's what you guys were thinking, but I don't want to give you so much of my bias and my conjecture that it formulates your opinion based off my words. Rather, I'm giving commentary of the way that I took it, and I believe you guys should go watch it as well. But there are some things, like I said it before in the beginning, how the interviewer, the white guy in the back behind the bar, how he was saying certain things. So what I'm going to do is, I think I'm just going to go to that part there so you guys can hear what he said. And I want to make sure I go back here just enough so you can understand the background. Let's see here.
To be the end
Trans is
of
as the
black
end of
support
families.
for the left.
I mean,
because they're giving hormone blockers to
but
kids.
Our precious trans, there's a small group of human beings who are the most vulnerable. They're demonized the most. They have least
They're not
amount of
demonized.
power.
They're on cover of
demonized.
magazines.
they're not demonized.
They're
Everyone
demonized.
wants their kid
No.
to be one. It's the hot new
That
thing.
is the one group that is killed more by vigilantes among our
Not
citizenship than
vigilantes,
anybody
the
else.
gangsters they were dating. They're drug addicts
Yeah,
who are
a lot of
hanging
them
out
have
with
a lot
bad
of drug
boys.
issues, a lot of
They're
drug
dating
issues.
MS-13
And that's true.
Bloods and Crips.
And let me
But
tell you,
that's-
So this guy stated that trans folk who are being unalived is dating the gangs and thugs, MS-13, Bloods and Crips. That's totally untrue. Majority of these trans folk, these trans people, were getting killed by neo-Nazi groups, by white supremacists. Right. So again, he's sparking outrage, in my opinion, because when we look at historically, right, black gangs in America, they have been created and emerged in black areas, right, where we've come up. And you can trace black gangs, so to speak, or black empowerment groups, so to speak, to the civil rights era, because the migration of black Americans from the South to the North and the subsequent challenges faced by our communities, while motivations and ideologies may vary, black gangs have formed as a means of self-protection for their neighborhoods, territorial control in some regards, or pursuing economic opportunities through illicit means, okay? Hustling, as we know it. But on the other hand, neo-Nazi gangs are characterized by white supremacist ideology. And we have to understand that these groups espouse racist and anti-black beliefs, advocating for the dominance of the white race and often promoting violence against black Americans. See, they draw inspiration from the Nazi Germany, and they seek to promote their extreme ideologies through intimidation, acts of hate. Black gangs are not going around trying to annihilate and unalive trans folk. And you're stating that trans folk are dating these so-called Bloods and Crips and MS-13. MS-13, I believe, is an El Salvadorian gang. But you're stating that they're dating black gangsters and black gangs, which is totally untrue. They've been unalived by the neo-Nazi Party of America, right? That's what we need to understand. Because, again, now, when I look at neo-Nazi groups around the world, in Africa, you see the Rhodesian Whites Party, and they're not even, okay, they are concluding South Africa, because South Africa has a lot of white supremacist gangs. North America, they're talking about Canada, you have Aryan God, Aryan Nation, Heritage Front, Northern Order, Resistant Records. Look at Mexico. As I told you before, there's a lot of neo-Nazis, there's a lot of white supremacists in the Hispanic culture, in the Hispanic countries, okay? And I'm not just talking about Mexico, all right? And then when it comes to the United States, look how many neo-Nazi groups that we have. Now, I showed you this over here. They have a lot of them throughout almost every state in America. And here's a whole list of them, right? We have plenty of neo-Nazi groups. Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Paraguay, Peru, Uruguay, Japan, Iran, Israel, Mongolia, Taiwan. Then you have Europe, Belgium and the Netherlands, Bosnia, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Germany. Now, of course, Germany and probably Great Britain has the most out of the European countries, okay? Germany and Great Britain. So you see some of these parties are internationally, right? If you look at some of these parties. Greece, Ireland, Italy, or maybe Spain too as well, Malta, Norway, Portugal, Russia. Yep, Russia has a lot as well. Serbia, Spain, look at Spain. So, and the reason why this is important, Sweden, Switzerland, Slovakia, Turkey, United Kingdom, the UK, okay, Ukraine. Then you have Australia, New Zealand. So when we look at all of these, we have to understand that neo-Nazism, white supremacy is worldwide. And he pointed out that there's some black gangs in America that are essentially going around attacking and unaliving trans folk, which is 100% untrue. The majority of these attacks are coming from white supremacist groups. And the only thing you have to do is look it up. Yeah, you're going to see onesies and twosies out there, but just in the beginning, we're talking about the vast majority. Because when we look at this, right, I take, for instance, white biker gangs, right? They're also known as the outlaw motorcycle clubs. They often originate from a subculture associated with motorcycle enthusiasts, how they start off at one thing and end up another thing. And believe it or not all white biker gangs are involved in criminal activity, but a mass majority of them are, right? Because they are associated with organized crime, drug trafficking, and very, very violent behavior. So we have to look at these things because, okay, I'll do the compare and contrast. Black gangs, yep, involved in criminal activities, drug trafficking, extortion, gang violence. But however, it's very essential to note that not all black gangs engage in criminal behavior. And some community-based organizations work to provide support and opportunities for their members. But when we look at neo-Nazi gangs, they're primarily focused on spreading their hateful ideologies and engaging in acts of domestic and international terrorism, hate crimes, and violent acts against black communities, right? They aim to intimidate and provoke fear among their targeted groups and incite social unrest. They love these things, right? Because are there white supremacists in white biker gangs? Yes. Are all white biker gangs white supremacists? No. But some of the crimes do relate, like human trafficking, drug trafficking, criminal activity, smuggling, money laundering. Because these gangs typically operate within a hierarchy structure, enforcing their dominance and protecting their interests through violence and criminal enterprise. So when we look at the social dynamics and influence, when we're talking about black gangs in America, they are awfully deeply rooted in local communities and have a significant impact on neighborhoods they operate in. Because these gangs, our gangs, okay, I guess they're ours, right, have a sense of identity, protection, and support for their members, while others perpetuate violence and contribute to community based on race. Because neo-Nazis tend to operate on the fringes of society and often exist as smaller, secretive groups who are militarized, who are usually either active or non-active policemen, or either active or non-active military. Anytime you think about a white supremacist neo-Nazi group, you think about a militarized group, and if you don't, you should. Because they seek to recruit like-minded individuals to their causes and propagate their ideologies through online platforms, rallies, and acts of violence. Because here's one: Young and Violent, the growing menace of America's neo-Nazi skinheads. It states here that these skinheads have close associations with old line hate groups in the U.S. and to help boost the morale and activity level of other white supremacy organizations, including the KKK and the White Aryan Resistance, which is known as WAR. It says promoted its bigotry through computer networks, cable TV, and national television talk shows. And they said Tom Metzer encourages skinheads to engage in violence under the rubric of self-defense. Now tell me, what does that sound like? It sounds like a police officer dealing with a black person that feared for his life, even though the black person has his hands up, his back turned, and causes no threat to that particular police officers. It also states here that skinheads are affiliated with KKK factions across the country and often serve as security guards at KKK rallies. They said majority of the skinhead neo-Nazi violence are in California, Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Maryland, Missouri, Oklahoma, Oregon, Texas, Washington, and Wisconsin. It states here that skinheads activity is evident in at least 21 states. So that's half of America, but we know it's in all of America. And regional groups are slowly forming a loose national network with the help of more established leaders to publicize these efforts. Of course, they're in Georgia. Why? These acts of hate, these acts of violence, because Atlanta is in Georgia. Of course it's in Maryland. Why is that? Because Baltimore is in Maryland. Of course it's in Illinois, because Chicago is in Illinois. Of course it's in Florida, because Tallahassee, Miami are in Florida. Of course it's in Texas, because Dallas and Houston is in Texas. So when I look at these states, I'm looking at the mass majority of a lot of the popular cities, which are majority black. So in my opinion, it's very crucial to recognize that generalizations may not fully capture the complexities and diversities within these groups, but there can be variations in behavior, beliefs, and criminal environment and racial acts of hate that are among these so-called different factions and individual members. But we need to understand that the differences is essential for addressing the unique challenges posed by each group and their missions to eradicate their countries and the world of black people. My bias, my conjectures. I think it's important. Let me move on. Recruitment of young people by American hate groups. We're still talking about neo-Nazis. It states here that the combination of racism, hate, and violence with punk music is discussed in the articles chronicling the evolution and increasing threat posed by skinheads. The skinhead subculture is further illustrated in a case study of a youth gang in San Francisco. Other articles describe skinhead involvement in intimidation, assault, murder, and other racially motivated violence. And so going back to a Candice Owens stating, where are these hate groups at? Why doesn't black people know about them? Why every time I ask them, they have no idea where they are? So the Department of Justice know where they are, right? They know they're skinhead. And family, skinheads are not just white people with bald heads that are racist. No, skinheads is kind of the label, like neo-Nazi, white supremacy. That's just kind of a label that they give them. It states here that data sources for an 18-month global study included Jewish communion institutions, human rights organizations, law enforcement agencies, university-based research centers, defactors, and confidential sources. And it goes on to say here that skinhead movement is active in 33 countries on 6 continents. It numbers some 70,000 youth. And these are the recruitments of these neo-Nazi groups, that they're recruiting 70,000 people within an 18-month sort of study that they did. The countries that skinheads are found in the greatest numbers of course, Germany, Hungary, the Czech Republic, the United States, Poland, United Kingdom, Brazil, Italy, and Sweden. They also stated these other countries went over: France, Spain, Canada, and the Netherlands. So again, when I hear a lot of our people speak about where they want to travel and where they want to go, most likely you're going to countries that have a high population of neo-Nazis and racists. Now, like I was told by a Russian buddy of mine's, they sold me a car. He was only a buddy by the way of a business transaction, by the way of a car. So when I say buddy, I just mean business contract. But nonetheless, he told me, Ray, if you go to Russia, I advise you just to stay in Moscow or large cities, you know, but mostly Moscow where there's a lot of non-black people at. I said, why do you say that? He said, because Russia has a lot of, white supremacist groups, because he knew where my stance was. And so here's Russia with all their white supremacist neo-Nazi groups. And people, and for some time, we really thought about going to Spain. We're like, we're going to go to Spain, check out the history. And maybe that's still on the list. But family, when you idolize European countries over the Caribbean and over African countries, I just want you to take a step back and look at the dynamics of race and hate within those countries. Yes, you may be treated better because you are American. And the only reason why they're treating you better because you have more money than the immigrants from Africa and the Caribbean. But that don't make you any better. You still have the skin, and it's not protection for the complexion when in those countries. So I hear a lot of people talking about they want to go to Spain. That was on my list as well. Portugal. They want to go to Italy. Oh, yeah, I would love to go to Italy. Well, you probably need to watch your back. And you think that you are outnumbered in America 3 or 4 to 1. When you go to countries like Italy, Ireland, you are outnumbered 15 to 1, okay? Majority of these countries, especially in Europe, are over 90% Anglo-Saxon. Over 90% Anglo-Saxon. Currently, I have a buddy who's on a contract working in Germany. And I really need to have a discussion with him because I think he mostly stays around the military base, which those neo-Nazi groups tend not to operate in because of the diversity and the protection that military members may receive, right? They don't want to have no incidents when it comes to diplomats of the American government. But he's black, so who knows how that may turn out. But I really, guys, want you to take a tally rather, of where you want to travel around the world and the dangers you may incur simply because of the idealistic perspective that the Western world gives you on these European countries. Because doesn't it sound right? Oh yeah, we're going to Italy here in the spring. Yeah, we're gonna go to Barcelona. Barcelona's in Spain. But yeah, think of an Italian country. Yeah, but anyway, we idolize these countries because in some regards, we have been whitewashed in our thinking and as well as our ideologies to put these European nations way above Caribbean and African countries. Because, I mean, outside of Mexico, the Caribbean, and some parts of Central America, majority of these trips are very expensive because their dollar is equal or probably greater value than the American dollar. So in my opinion, if I'm gonna take a vacation, and lately I've been going to either Central America or Africa or the Caribbean, that's where I tend to reside, where there's large populations of black people, whether it be Afro-Latino or just Caribbean or just African folk, right? I'd rather go see where my people came or derived from versus where they ended up. Hopefully that makes some sense. I see Jermaine Anderson. Thank you for moderating, sir. I see TJ. You missed a lot, TJ. King, I see you. That's why I'm moving to Africa. Yeah, when we're talking about moving, a couple of years ago, my wife and I, we really thought about moving to the continent. We started, last year, we went to Ghana. This year, we went to South Africa. But what we soon realized, King, is that we are American. We are foundational Black Americans. We are U.S. freedmen. We are descendants of the slaves that built America. So when you go to these other countries, there's going to be parts of America that you're going to absolutely love that you no longer intake. There's going to be parts of that country that you're going to love. There's going to be parts maybe even of the social climate, the political aspects of that country you may love. But something's telling me that a lot of those expats who are Black Americans in these African Caribbean countries, they have been moving back to America in droves, because at the core of your being, if you're not originally from that country, you are at your core American, because you can feel on this soil, on this land, the energy in which your ancestors has built. Your family bled and died to build this country, either by the motivation of economic empowerment or by the motivation of a whip, torture, and being maimed. And so, in some regards, some people are going to look at you, which really shouldn't matter. You make your own decisions, as you fleeing because you wasn't willing to stand and fight. And in some regards, some people are going to look at you as a Pan-Africanist, whereas though you just want to go where a majority of the people that look like you. But there's a huge, huge difference that me not trying to stop you from moving to Africa, I would never do that. But I will say this, take into account the culture. Black American culture is the most influential culture in the world. It doesn't matter what country I go to. You're going to see, hear, feel, and in some regards, taste Black American culture. So the root of it all is Black America. So when you go to these places, with the money that you have, you may live like a king. But your experience, your involvement will be as though you are a peasant or a slave within those nations, because you're not going to have any political positioning. More times than not, these countries want you to come over there with the bag. They want you to come over there with thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars so you can pump inside their economy. So there's a lot there. I could speak on that all day, but there's a lot to be said there, but I don't want to, I'm trying to find the words here. I'm really not trying to discourage you from going. That's all I'm stating. But I know for myself, my wife and I, we took a step back. We thought about this for 3 or 4 years, and we decided that the best country for us is right here in these United States of America, because there's a reckoning. There's a reckoning and a bill that this country owes to our people. And I want to be here when it occurs. I want to be here. I want to be on the forefront of when it occurs. Because at the end of the day, they really need to cut the check of what they owe to us and our people. So again, if you believe that you're going to live a better life in Africa, then so be it. I'm not going to look at you as a fleer. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you're tired of it. But I can tell you this. Choose your country wisely in Africa, because we're going to Morocco next year. When I looked at the demographics of Morocco, the northern countries of Africa, those Arab Emirates, majority of the countries look white. Okay, and this is more historic for my wife and I. We go to these countries and we engulf ourselves in the culture, the food. We go to museums. We go to certain historical sites. Just kind of learn the history of all, putting together this puzzle piece of civilization and the birth of life in the world. We kind of do these things to understand the world that we live in a little bit better. And I can tell you this, our experiences in Ghana was 100% different than our experiences in South Africa. And unfortunately, we didn't have the opportunity to visit Johannesburg. I should have did a little more research. But let's just say if you go to South Africa, I would advise you to visit Johannesburg over Cape Town. But if you have time and money for both, then Johannesburg as well as Cape Town. Two largely different demographics. Let me tell you, Cape Town, South Africa is majority white. You're going to see black people there, but you're going to see a whole hell of a lot of white people. And we really thought we was in America or Europe. Okay? So yeah, guys, you have a great one. Hopefully you got something out of this commentary. And yeah, I see you guys on the